Welcome to Target Market Insights, the multifamily and marketing podcast. Each week, John Kasman interviews multifamily and marketing experts to teach you how to find the best places to invest, attract investors, and grow your portfolio. You are listening to Target Market Insights with your host, John Kasman.
Welcome to Target Market Insights. I'm your host, John Kasman of Kasman Capital Group, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. Now, if you're enjoying this podcast, do me a favor, take 1 minute and leave us a 5-star rating and review. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Now, if you're interested in multifamily and you want to review a sample deal, you are in luck. We have a special download on our website of a sample deal package. Just go to kasmancapital.com/sample deal, and you'll also join our mailing list to get tips and exclusive investment opportunities. That's kasmancapital.com/sample deal. Now, today we're going to be talking to a vertically integrated value add investor. And I'll certainly explain what the heck that actually means. Michael Ealy has developed Nassau Investments into one of the key development firms in the Cincinnati area. Over an extensive 10-year period, Mr. Ealy has applied this knowledge of property and asset management to negotiate hundreds of successful real estate transactions. Mike's strength is in identifying the right projects, developing a clear vision, and then putting together the right team to specifically execute each project. With that said, let's welcome to the show, Mike Ealy.
Hey, what's up, buddy? Thanks for having me, John. How you been, brother?
I'm doing well. Mike, it's good to have you on. Always good to talk to somebody else who's in the same city now that I'm here in Cincinnati. So, Mike, let's start with that, man. Are you originally from Cincinnati? Tell me about your background.
Yeah, so, even before that, man, congratulations on your 100th episode, man. You're knocking it down. There's some consistency there. And you're taking on all the stars, representing the Windy City and the Chi. So, man, congratulations.
Thank you, man. Thank you, man.
I started off here in Cincinnati. Did a few single families and multi-units. And, life was good. I rented one, lived in the other, rented free. And I kept building off of that. And then I ended up getting 2 full-service car washes. Life was good, making $300,000 a year. 300 or 400, had the long hair, lost it all, literally lost my money and my hair. And so I started over, had to move in with my mom and dad when I was about 30 years old, and they painted my room pink and lavender. And yeah, man, it was sexy, brother. It was sexy.
Was that intentional?
I don't know, man.
Was that a way to let you make sure you weren't too comfortable?
Yeah, no, they weren't expecting me back, but I started back small. I ended up getting a few partners I went to school with. I said, hey, man, I can make some money with you. And I took it easy. I just took fees and management fees, realtor fees. I found the deal. I renovated, I managed it, sold it. And each deal I netted them like 20 to 30,000. I said, man, I got it down packed. And after that, I ended up getting an investor that lent me about $200,000 at, it was like 10% at 2 points. And then from there, I got a multi-unit deal, a 28, my first one. And I learned how to really do this guerrilla marketing where you're really streets, marketing it to different agencies, not the normal routes. And then I ended up getting a 48 unit and we netted $1 million. And then the rest is history. And now we're into apartments and hotels now.
That's awesome, man. So let's start with, I want to hit on a couple of things. You went over a lot, and obviously it's great to talk to you on this side of the journey. But I think that obviously you learned a lot going through some of those hardships, especially when you were looking up at those lavender and pink walls. So let's talk about maybe some of the mistakes you made at that time, because you said you had invested in a few properties at that moment. You had some car washes and things like that. Mm-hmm. What went wrong that kind of put you in that pink and lavender space?
Really what did, I became unfocused. I was focused on more about making money, which is the, but you still got to focus on one task. And I just really needed to focus on real estate. That was growing for me. I went into this car wash and I wasn't really business savvy. Yes, I looked at the existing taxes and the performance that they did and watched what they made. So I felt I could be successful. Um, but what I did not do, which I carry on to this day, is I didn't set up any reserves, the escrow, or account for a rainy day. And the car wash, I don't regret it, but I never want to do that ever again. You know, whoever thinks that it's going to rain every day in April and May, and it rained every day. And so I wasn't bringing in cash flow. So I started getting behind the bills. Then I didn't have any reserves. So now you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. You're reaching into your real estate pockets, your account to keep up. And then it just started crumbling beneath me. And, I didn't really have a budget, didn't even have any projections. Uh, just went in with the attitude we could do anything, which is great. You need that. But you have to have your budget. You have to have your projections. You have to have your management systems in place. And it was one of the greatest lessons to this day. A lot of people, when they start real estate, even on a small four family, they don't put an escrow for reserves for, when you got a turnover, when you have eviction. You're going to need money to fix that unit back up, to bring it back online. A lot of times people don't even put reserves away monthly for taxes. Like, oh, I'll just pay the taxes when it's due. Next thing you know, you done wiped out your account for 2 months. It's just easier. Put, 3% of the gross, no matter what it is, away every month into a different account for your reserves, for your turnovers or a CapEx. And then for your insurance, that should be a monthly bill that you just pay out. But if not, if you pay a premium up front, escrow that amount every month into your account. I promise you, these two simple things will just keep you alive for quite some time.
No, those are great tips, and to your point on folks, especially if you're in the single family rental space or small multifamily starting out, we always look at it as reserves and operating capital. And, it's a mistake that a lot of investors make, especially when they're underwriting, right? So they
Yes.
start putting your numbers together, a deal looks great. Well, you're buying a deal that, yeah, the roof may be okay now, but if it's a 15-year-old roof, at some point, you're going to
Yeah.
have to replace it. So if your business plan is to hold this thing long term, if you're a buy and hold investor, you still need to think about, having reserves available to replace that. Same with mechanicals, same with, again, other things that happen. If you have vacancies, if you have a unit turn, we've got a unit right now in Chicago, and it's in higher in neighborhood.
Mhm.
So we're going in and doing the unit turn. The unit turn is costing me $1,200, right? So it's important to make sure when you underwrite, you have the budget for these kind of things, because if you don't, it can crush your numbers. I mean, if you're doing it and your profit is $200 a unit on average,
That's
and
right.
you're not factoring in the reserves, the operating capital, you could wind up in a tough place. And, you mentioned rainy days in April or May. I mean, that's the same thing with real estate, right? I mean, if you're running it and you get into the various cycles and you have higher than expected vacancies, what are you
Yes.
going to do to be able to withstand that? So it's really important to do that. I think those are great points of understanding. Yes, we always like to look at the rents and projected rents and kind of, the utility costs and the costs that we absolutely know. But
Right.
there's things that pop up that you didn't think about that you absolutely need to just put a little bit of money away. I like your 3% rule of thumb for gross rents, but just make sure you're putting some money away to take care of those things. All right. If you could go back to that time frame, knowing what you know now, being in that situation, what would you tell yourself? You're already into it, right? So you already don't have the 3% put away. But what could you have done differently or learn from, that opportunity where maybe you could have saved that or repositioned yourself during that time frame?
You know, uh, if I had to do it over again, it would have been more focused. I would have just stuck to real estate. And in addition, what did it, I was over leveraged. So, that was, I used that, although Robert Allen changed my life. There was a book called No Money Down, and I think it was the 80s or the 90s, Robert Allen. And I read his book. But I did that Carlton Sheets. So I know some of you may not remember him, but Carlton Sheets, man. But that was a different market. I mean, back then you could pick your own appraiser, you could work your own deal out, and we would over leverage the house or the apartment deal, pull cash out. But you had to be disciplined. You took that money to buy other things. And I did that. I followed that example. But you get to a point, you can't keep doing that. You're going to have to start finding some deals. It's really just the way of, hey, I don't really have any cash, out of the box thinking. And so I don't think that theory was expressed enough. Like, look, you only want to do this 1 or 2 times, and then go find you a real deal. This is kind of getting your foot in the game. Like people who didn't have money. I was like, well, if you got credit, you can use a line of credit from a bank or your credit card. If you don't have credit, then you may have a 401k you can borrow from to put a down payment. If you have an insurance policy, there's a cash reserve. You can pull some money out. I'm still doing deals, even with my bigger projects. I'm pulling money from my insurance policy, because that's actually a tax strategy for me, where I'm putting away money that I won't have to pay taxes on when I pull it out. And I can actually overpay my premium because they charge the insurance. And I'm like, well, I'm with Northwestern and Western Southern, but with Northwestern, I'm able to put 8% away. 2% goes to fees, but the rest comes back into my account. So it's just another way to kind of put money away, a tax strategy. So, but yeah, the thing is, I would have found better deals. I wouldn't have kept over leveraging, but it got me in the game. And because I did it so wrong, I'm doing it so right now.
Well, I mean, I think the takeaway for listeners is, listen, let's learn from the mistakes you made, but ultimately, we know that those hardships made you who you are today, right?
That's
And
right.
being able to learn from that and grow from that, that's important. I think if anyone's listening to this and right now you're kind of in a rough place, whether it's through your investments or you've got some deals that aren't working out, I think the key is just stay focused on the big picture. Each deal is an individual deal. It's not a representation of who you are as a person. Just do your best with that deal. If you have to, get out of it and just, cut the cord and learn from it, and just, make the adjustments moving forward. And that's really the best you can do. So let's transition, right? Let's move forward. Let's get you out
Yeah.
of, that pink and lavender room, and let's bring you closer to present day. So, what kind of deals do you look for now? Let's talk a little bit more about kind of your current portfolio and what you're working on.
So the deals, we look for great undervalued deals with some construction. Uh, I can show you about 3 deals. There was one deal I passed on about 3 or 4 times. It was in the inner city, but that market was depressed. And they wanted 400,000. And every year I kept turning down, like, I don't want that. But then I end up noticing, at least in Cincinnati, we found, like Mark Twain said, if you want to be safe, go to Ohio, because that'll be the last place everything happens, right? And truly, we're just now catching up with rents where everybody else is, right? We're just now seeing where 2 bedrooms are starting to rent for $950 to $1,250 in a D plus C market, right? That wasn't the case before. Like, just a year and a half ago, you still could find a really nice apartment for about $750, $800, but that had amenities and everything. Not anymore. That's over with. If you want something nice, you're gonna pay $1,250 plus, and even with that $1,250, I can't guarantee you're gonna have amenities. But what happened in this 1C area, we noticed the rents jumping up like that, and so I immediately said, you know what? We're going back to that deal that we can get for 400. We actually took that down to the studs. We're all in that for 1.7. It's 30 units. I'm very conservative in my numbers. I did it we could do rents at 825. And when it's all said and done, we'll have a valuation of 2.1 to 2.3, and we'll be all in for 1.7. So, roughly 400,000 to 500,000 in net value. But that whole market changed. It's regenderfying, we'll say. But
Mm-hmm.
I can't even say that. It's a millennial market. They want to come back to the city so much.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's moving away from the city, and they don't care where they at as long as it's nice, as long as it got granite and nice cabinets and nice flooring. They're moving in, and so that's kind of our niche now. We're buying in the city and changing these units and making them more higher end, and people are paying. And so instead of getting 825, we ended up getting 1250 right off the rip. And I rented the 4 units quickly, and now we got a valuation upwards of 3.8 to 4 million.
Oh wow, for a 30 unit, that's incredible.
30 unit is crazy, man. And then,
Wow.
but then I still do my little smaller units, 30. There was another 42 unit we bought. We got that for, let's say, 1.5. We're going to put 300 in. We did an entity transfer, so we control the taxes. They won't jump up right away, which is big because you got to realize if you're saving $30,000 in taxes, let's see, 30,000, and we're doing 8 cap rates around here, so 30,000 that's $375,000 that you didn't pay out expenses. You added to value. So because of that, we really only had a value of 2.1. Now we'll be able to sell this at 2.4, 2.7.
That's
But
awesome.
really hot, which a lot of people say, man, we can't find deals. But what's happening is people leaving meat on the bones, at least in this area. Like I said, the rents have been escalating because of water and taxes. People are now, the cap rates are getting lower, which means the value is higher. So people are selling at a 6 and a 6.5 cap rate. And we're like, oh my gosh, that's too expensive. But they're in an A neighborhood and their rents are low. They rent for $850, $900. As I said, I'm in the C neighborhood and get $1,250. They should be getting $1,200 to $1,500 a month per unit. But these people are like, look, I don't need to do anything. I can get way more money, do no work. I pass it on to the other person. And because we have relationships with some of these owners and people, they're like, I just want to get out. I want my cash. I'm ready to move on. And we're buying them, and we've been able to realize it without all the work. So I wouldn't give up my 30 unit where we gutted it down to the studs. But I do like going into an A neighborhood where all I have to do is raise the rents.
No, absolutely.
But I'll take it either way.
Absolutely, man. That's a great classic value add strategy. We're going to dive into that a little bit for sure. Before we do, I want to hit on a couple things that you said. Before you were talking about a strategy where you use kind of your life insurance policy and you kind of use those funds to invest. I know a few folks that do that. I think some refer to it as infinite banking. But that's a strategy for those who are listening, and I just want to call that out. You can certainly look into that. It's a phenomenal strategy. There's definitely some complexity to it, but there's a lot of value and a lot of upside. So looking at infinite banking if you're interested in what Mike is talking about there. And then you mentioned the entity transfer. It's funny enough, I just had a conversation with one of my partners about this earlier this week. We were doing a deal earlier this year. We were exploring doing an entity transfer because the taxes would have been significant, basically double. They would have doubled virtually from where they were if we didn't purchase the entity. This is something that is more common in Ohio. I'm not sure how prevalent it is in other markets. I do know that the school boards, because in Ohio it's the school boards who collect, and they're starting to crack down a little bit on that. So something that we should look into. But just really quickly, can you just explain a little bit more about the entity transfer and the significance of doing that versus just kind of a traditional sale?
Okay, so let's break it down. So on a regular sale, this is a perfect example. Let's say we bought, currently this property that we bought is valued at $900,000. But when we go to close, if we just do the traditional, his LLC bought LLB, right? Then on the HUD, it's going to show we paid $1.5 million for this property. So when they go down, they're going to record it as a $1.5 million transaction. So then in months or maybe a year, our tax is going to reflect a $1.5 million valuation. So, and I think we're about 2.8 or 3% of the value. So, my taxes would spike almost $30,000, $40,000, which I would lose, which would decrease my value. But if you do an entity transfer, the entity A, what happens is, I don't want to get in detail because I don't want to say I'm practicing law, but in summary, entity A buys it and it stays in the same name, right? And so the transaction is actually off the books, in summary. And then once that happens, then it's transferred again to the new entity. So in essence, you're buying all the interest of ownership from entity A. You're taking that ownership and then you transfer it into another entity. And it's basically buying shares of a stock company, but you're buying everything out of it, all its assets and everything. And it just so happened it owned a 30-unit building.
Right. So, Mike, the two big questions I always get when I talk to people about this, one is, how do you protect yourself from any liability that the previous owners might have had? And then the second question they always ask me is, how does the bank look at that? Because if you're going out and taking a loan and you're not purchasing the asset directly, how do you qualify for the loan and get to close and all that?
Well, one, I leave that legal part to my team, but one of the easiest ways is one, just do your title search. Does anything come up? That's really where everything's, are there any legal or current law, legal issues, litigations? And that should all be in court. And if that's clear, most likely it's going to be an easy entity transfer. Uh, uh, well, I'm sorry, what was the other question you had?
About the bank for your lender. So because of
Now, once you get into commercial, it's a whole different ballgame. I'm gonna tell you, you'll get a loan quicker in a commercial deal, right? As long as you can show your income, than you would trying to buy a single family house. I mean, I had people, partners that he had filed bankruptcy years ago. Couldn't get a loan if he depended on it. And he had like 700 cash in the bank, 6 years old, couldn't get a loan. Go do apartment building, they threw money at him. It's just a different ball game. As long as that commercial property is generating income, they're sophisticated enough that they do these entity transfers. So, I thought it would be an issue when we first started, but it has not been. We've been really focusing on those these last 3 or 4 years because what I traditionally would do is dispute the taxes.
Mm-hmm.
That was one way of doing it. And what happens is that will decrease the value and it would hold for 3 years. But now in Cincinnati, let's say Hamilton County,
Mm-hmm.
they haven't been doing that. Once they see you did some renovations, they immediately increase your value. So then I start filing tax abatements where they abate the future value and they'll keep you at your current value that you acquired it at for a 10-year. But that's so much paperwork. It's worth it, but it's a lot of paperwork and they got a stickler. So if you can do it with this entity transfer, that's much easier. It's kind of a one-time deal, and you don't really have the city or the county doing annual audits on your property.
Yeah. So, hey, some good strategies there. Obviously, there's different strategies you can look at, but something to keep in mind. I think one thing that kills a lot of deals is the reassessment of taxes. So, Mike Ealy has a couple strategies that we've looked into as well. And I would say it's probably a good idea to give a great caveat that neither one of us are attorneys or tax professionals. So, we're talking about strategies, but you should absolutely consult with your attorneys, your CPAs, your tax professionals, if these are ideas or strategies you're looking to employ. With that said, Mike, let's move on. Let's talk a little bit more about Cincinnati as a market. You started talking about there being more opportunities in the city. and you gave mention to the deal that you're working on. What are you seeing as you look at the macro market? What do you see? And then as you look at sub markets and different opportunities in the city of Cincinnati, where do you see some of the best opportunities?
Really, that's a great question, and it's kind of complicated. But for us, why we've been still so successful, because it is a tight market. It's a very competitive market. Deals are flying off the shelf. The thing that's been good, so great for us, we've been here for a while and we established a lot of great relationships. So because of that, deals come to us. Everybody on our team, we all have our strengths, but we all have great relationships and we feed each other. And that's why we've been successful. But what I'm seeing is, again, this cycle overall in Cincinnati. And it was funny, we actually did a report, I don't know, 5 years ago about the millennial market, because we noticed that right now all the units are not that great. They're just standard grade, and you got these people that used to live in the suburbs wanting to move back into the city, but no true quality housing. I mean quality housing, I'm talking about granites and the nice, 42-inch cabinets, a decent yard, not a big yard, but just a small, decent yard. They weren't getting that. So we said, you know what, let's fix some nice stuff up in a really rougher area. And from there, people were just renting it left and right. So immediately I was like, man, we got to create a kind of a fund to kind of manage
Mm.
this. And because we said these millennials are going to take up this market, they're going to want to live in the city and they're going to pay. And what's happening is these millennials are buying their first houses. They're flying off the shelf. Uh, the values are jumping. And so now in a second, I'll say 2 more years, you're going to have this cycle again. Downtown, the city's going to get too expensive. And now you're going to have people migrating back out to the suburbs again.
Yeah, it's interesting. We do a lot. I mean, from my background's in marketing, so we do a lot looking at trends and things like that. And there are a couple things that we see, and this is across a lot of different markets, right? We're seeing this in most major metropolitan markets where the urban core is seeing a huge growth and spike from millennial renters. And part of that is also understanding what they're going through, right? So, say you're 30 years old, you're single because they're getting married later in life, you don't have
Yes.
any kids. Well, what do you want to live in the suburbs for? You're 30 years old, you're making good money. Why do you want to live in the suburbs? You want to be close to the action. You want to be close to downtown. You want to be close to nightlife. You want to be close to
Mm-hmm.
restaurants. So they're looking at these areas and they're able to get, the best value that they can get being close to downtown, but maybe still have a bit of a yard for a dog or whatever the case may be. So we are seeing a lot of demand grow. And then one great thing about the Cincinnati market is I think Marcus and Millichap for the last couple of years have had either number one or top
Yeah.
three as far as yields, right? So as far as the cash flow that you can get, it was number one and number three. And quite frankly, it's also the most undervalued major market in the country. So there's a lot of upside with yields to
Yeah.
your point about Cincinnati being able to catch up. So it's already number one in yields, and there's an opportunity for rents to essentially increase. So there really is an opportunity to make more money. I will tell you too, living in Chicago before we moved here, one thing that I was always shocked with, one, there's a huge development of 60s style properties, right? So a lot
Yeah.
of 1960s developments. I don't know what happened. I mean, I know obviously there was the boomer population, but the 60s are a lot of apartments built here.